Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. SMC here. I have some more stories for you. Today I'm going to discuss expectations versus reality when it comes to college education, crime scene processing, even job satisfaction or abilities while I put on this makeup look. I probably should have talked about expectations versus reality last week because my expectation was a lot different than the reality of the look I created, but I digress. As usual, thank you for being here, and if you like crime scene stories or makeup or learning how to do your makeup well, please consider subscribing. And if you have any expectation versus reality stories or crime scene questions or makeup questions, please leave a comment below and I will answer them all, likely in writing as well as part of a video. Also, as usual, crime scene stories contain material that is sensitive, graphic, or disturbing in nature, and viewer discretion is highly advised. If you are having thoughts or feelings of hurting yourself or others, you need to speak to someone about them immediately. Don't just send a text or put a post on social media. Actually get in touch with someone and talk it out with them. That could be a family member, a friend, someone in your neighborhood, someone from your church, someone from your work. You really need to speak about these thoughts or feelings that you're having. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That phone number is 1-800-273-TALK. Again, that's 1-800-273-8255. You can look online at your local police agency's website, and they should have a non-emergency dispatch line that you could call and just let them know, or you can call 911. But it is imperative, if you are having thoughts or feelings of hurting yourself or others, that you talk it out and get some attention on those thoughts and feelings to try to figure out what the problem is before you possibly do something that you're going to regret or that you can't take back. Now that the standard disclaimer is done, if you stick around, you will get to see me put all my makeup on, as well as talking about those expectations versus reality. Have a great day, and I'll be right back. Hi again, thanks for hanging around, and a double thank you if you went ahead and subscribed during the quick little break in between the intro and now. Today I decided to talk to you a little bit about expectations versus reality. I've had that experience on many scenes where the victim who I was interacting with had one expectation, and I needed to educate them on the reality. But I will get to that part. I'm going to start all the way back before I went to college. Well, the beginning of my college. I was a non-traditional student, meaning that when I started seriously pursuing my degree, I was 24 years old. And so typically, traditional would be those individuals who finish high school and then immediately have already applied or they're already going. So you're 18, 19 years old when you start college. I had taken a few classes in my hometown, but nothing serious. And I was just, after high school, working and making money. And, where I grew up, that wasn't college just wasn't necessarily the expected pathway for people. I think the expected pathway tended to be more just get out there and start working. So that's what I was doing. But eventually, I decided to move away from my hometown. And one of the conditions for my moving was that I would be able to go to college to get a degree to get a real job. So that's what I did. I started at a community college, which was local to where I was living. And at first I was going to get there Associate of Science degree in crime scene technology, because I thought, well, that'll be perfect. As is the typical routine for when you're starting at a college or university, they have you meet with an advisor. And this advisor was like, well, do you want to continue on and get a 4-year degree? And I said yes. And they said, well, the Associate of Science is not going to cover the prerequisites needed for the 4-year degree. And I said, okay, well, what would you recommend? And they said, just go ahead and get your Associate of the Arts degree, because that covers all the prerequisites needed. And in the state I was in, it's just an automatic, if you get an AA degree from one of the community colleges in the system, that's automatic acceptance to one of the state schools or state universities. So you don't have to worry about the, am I in, am I not in, stuff like that. So I said, okay, that's what I'll do. And looking at the degree path for the nearest 4-year school, there was a lot of science required for that bachelor's degree, chemistry required, and what I did was I knocked out a bunch of those types of classes, as many as I possibly could at the community college level. And I'm thankful that I did, because when I went into that major school, I walked in there my first day of organic chemistry lecture. And I was 26 years old, so it's not like I'm some kid, I'm closer to 30 than I am to 20. And I walk in and there's 180 students in an auditorium, and I was shocked and a bit intimidated, even at my age. And it was so different than what I was used to all through growing up, and even through the community college experience, that it was pretty much the same in community college as it was in high school. 20 people in a classroom, the teacher learns all your names. If you have a question, it's no big deal. You're not embarrassed to raise your hand and interact and actually learn something. Walking into an auditorium with just shy of 200 students inside and one professor, it was definitely shocking. And that, like I said, was for organic chemistry lecture, which isn't something that everyone has to take. There were, at the time that I went there, this university was the 3rd largest in the country. I think it actually might be the largest now. And there were things like English communication 1 and 2, which is something that everybody has to take for any degree. And those class sections, so one classroom would be in an auditorium and have 400 students inside, and multiple teaching assistants and one professor. And I feel like it's very shocking, or it should be very shocking, for 18 or 19-year-old kids, where they're just rolling out of high school, if they roll into that and that is their experience, that may lead them straight down a road that isn't toward success. Anytime anyone has ever asked my advice on what should I do, especially the kids from Taekwondo who were about to go into college, and I always told them, go to a community college first. You're actually going to be having college material, but it's going to be a much smaller class size, a lot more interaction with your professor, and you won't be as shocked as if you just went straight to this big university. And hopefully they would benefit from that advice. I had been associated with a school that their sort of philosophy was not to groom these high schoolers towards going to community college. It was to groom them towards just going straight into a 4-year school after graduation. And their philosophy was, if you went to the community college, that you would never end up completing your degree, that you would just do that or start working or whatever. I felt like it was a very kind of biased against stereotypes response, And I will get a little bit more into that later. But they definitely even told me, like, do not promote the community college first, just be promoting going straight into a 4-year school. And based on my experience, I didn't do that. I didn't want to set these kids up for something that might be overwhelming to the point of, I'm so freaked out I'm not going to finish. Or maybe they're not so overwhelmed, they think it's awesome and a wonderful experience, but because their teacher has no idea who they are and the TAs don't and they can't even ask a question, maybe they end up failing, and then that is just defeating them to the point where after their first semester they drop out. So my expectation was that it wasn't going to be that crazy, and then the reality was shocking. But the overarching expectation, which is really what I wanted to discuss when it came to college, was that I thought, based on everything I'd ever heard about going to college, getting a degree, and getting a real job afterwards, was that once I had that degree, it was going to kind of be a piece of cake to get a job. I mean, even on my orientation day, they split for the major university. They had everybody show up, and we were all in this huge auditorium, and then they said, okay, now you guys are going to break off into your respective majors, and you're going to go talk to the program advisors. And myself and maybe 10 other students went off to go talk to forensics. Some of the other majors, like business administration, for instance, like 300 students went off and went to go talk to the business department. And I was thinking, wow, they're just starting out on their journey, so they were pretty much all going to graduate at the same time, roughly. That'll be the average. So here's 300 students coming into this class. And 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, 300 students are going to be finishing. That's a big influx of credentialed individuals trying to get into the workforce. And yeah, business, there's probably a lot of openings. But if you think that every graduating class would have 300, and that's just from one university, that's a market saturation nationwide. So I thought, man, I'm sitting pretty. Me and 10 other people will be getting done here and heading out into the world of forensics. We'll probably get hired right away. Maybe we'll even get jobs before graduation, because it's a specialized degree and not a ton of us are in here. Boy, was I wrong. So had someone told me at that point in time that just by the virtue of getting the degree does not in any way mean you're going to get a job in that field, or even tangential to that field, that's going to be gainful employment where you can pay your bills or your dreaded student loans, of which I took out quite a few, then I would have said, well, whoa, what degree, if any, is going to put me kind of guaranteed employment? And I feel like at that time, and still today, nursing is one of those degrees where you're just gonna, as soon as, because there's such a shortage of nurses all throughout the country, that if you get your nursing degree, I think you're gonna go right to work. And yeah, you're probably gonna get some really crappy shift overnight or whatever, but you're gonna be in your field and you're gonna be making money, which is the whole point of doing all this stuff, right? And at that time, if someone would have told me just by getting this degree does not at all mean you're going to get a job, but if you went over to the School of Nursing and you got that degree, then when you get done, you're going to get employed somewhere, I would have went over to the School of Nursing. Especially knowing what I know now. If I could know what I know now back then, that's what would have happened. But nobody told me that. It still was kind of being impressed upon me that no, as long as you do this and you have this degree, like, it's going to happen for you. I went through and I get the bachelor's degree and I did well. I was like 3.7, I think, overall GPA, which is good. And I had applied for many, many jobs. Never did I get anything. So I said, well, what the heck? I might as well get my master's degree in forensics. And that I did really quickly, and I get it with a 4.0, so very well, straight A's. Still applying for jobs, spending thousands of dollars flying around for interviews, to take tests, to try to be interviewed for a position, and nothing. And even over credentialed academically. So now I'm really overeducated for crime scene. But that's still what I wanted to do. I think I did apply for some lab positions, but and that's, what the degree really was my pedigree for. And still I wasn't getting hired because they all wanted experience. So for example, I flew all the way across the country and I was taking an exam to see if I was going to be qualified for an interview for one position. And as they were prepping us for the exam and talking to us about the job, they said, well, there might be a second position. But what they knew for sure was that there was one. There were 97 of us. So myself and 96 others in this room to take the test just to see if they would talk to us. And I had flown literally across the country to do this. And as I looked around the room, my heart just sank because there was a lot of different ages, men, women, young, old. And I knew that I knew I would do great at the test, but I also knew in looking around the room that it was highly likely there were people in that room who were maybe making a lateral transition and they had years of experience or even a year, which was a year more than I had or multiple years more than I had. So even if I aced the test, if they had someone else who maybe didn't even do as well on the test but had a year or two of actual crime scene experience, they were going to talk to that individual instead of me. So the expectation was this degree was going to get me a job, and the reality was I spent 7 years looking and hearing no and spending thousands of dollars before I ever got my big break into forensics. And that was it was kind of a fluke. I had interviewed and the agency decided, no, I think they had only interviewed me and one other person, and they decided to go with the other person. They didn't tell me why. That was just their decision. No big surprise. I had heard that song plenty already. And then I was like, well, this isn't going to happen for me. And I've spent a lot of time and money and energy invested in this. And it really feels more like it's going to have to be like a winning the lottery. The planets are all going to have to align just perfectly, and that is going to be when I actually get my big break. I can't keep waiting and trying and trying. So I decided I'm going to join the military. And at that time, because remember I was a non-traditional student, I was too old to join anything except the Air Force. I contacted the Air Force recruiter, and they said, yep, we can take you. Let's set up for when we're going to meet and when you can take the ASVAB and get you ready to rock and roll and join up. I had gotten my letters of recommendation that were required to join. I was really making great strides towards joining the military. So I thought, well, this will be exciting. It'll be a good career. I'll get to travel around. It's something, I can just be in there for the next 30 or 40 years, however long, and then retire and be good and have lived this full professional life. And then I get a call from that agency. And they said, are you still interested? Because the individual they had selected had failed out of her background investigation. I don't know what it was that caused her to flunk out. But I said, yeah, absolutely, I'm still interested. And so then I got my first crime scene job. And then the rest is history. And that really was my planets aligning, winning lottery experience, because I was only called back because that girl either lied or whatever caused her to fail her background was what was my saving grace and what got me the job. Had everything in her background been just fine, then I would have joined the Air Force and I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you about crime scene stories while I'm doing my makeup. Maybe I would be telling you combat stories instead. But the expectation really was that I would be able to get employed right away, even with a bachelor's degree. And the reality was like, hell no, that's not happening. And then my personal expectation was, well, of course, with a master's degree, I'm definitely going to get the job. And even with the master's, still the answer was no. That the real world experience was so much more valuable to these organizations. And, you know, you'll hear it a lot of like, well, how do you expect me to get experience if you don't give me a chance? If no one hires me, how do I get the job? Or how do I get the experience for the job? And I think that could be true across all fields. I only have the life experience from the forensic field, and it was very much the case. And these are agencies or like they don't care that you're just desperate or that you're, you know, so passionate and you really want to do the job. What they care about is a good hire that is not going to be a waste of their money, and that it's somebody that can get in there and do the job as it's supposed to be done. They don't want to spend a ton of time training someone if they don't have to. From a business standpoint, it's understandable, but just from a human standpoint, it is really disheartening. As my daughter grows up, I really hope that when it's time for her to go to college, that we can look around at the job and the workforce environment and see, you know, what is it that is really needed? Which I would love for her to be interested in some type of job that is just going to be guaranteed employment, like how nursing was when I was starting, or how nursing is today. And maybe that'll still be the case for her when it's her time, but maybe not, since that's going to be a little while away. You know, and maybe she's just going to want to only do what it is she's passionate about, and she's not going to be interested in doing what's going to be like the guaranteed moneymaker. You know, you have to follow your heart to some degree. But I also hope that she can be smart about her investment and my investment in her future, and pick something that she would be happy doing forever that will also get her a job. With the popularity of forensic shows on TV, there is a pretty steep expectation from the bulk of lay society. I don't even know how many crime scenes I've been on where the victim was like, well, I've seen this on TV before, can't you try this, or can't you do that, or how long is this going to take, because it doesn't look like it takes that long on TV. And I've had to be able to explain to them, no, I can't dust for latent prints on the t-shirt that the suspect moved, because that's not a suitable surface. There's no scientific technique that is going to develop the print off of that t-shirt. And if you saw it on TV, you know, that makes for really good and interesting TV. But the reality of it is, it can't be done. that was purely for entertainment purposes only, and we cannot develop a print on the t-shirt, as my example of their expectation versus the reality of what is possible. I've been able to explain to the victims successfully, why I can't get a print off of that, or why there's no DNA on whatever they're suggesting, despite what they believe from popular culture and the media. I've even had to do it a few times for detectives, but not so much, because a detective will usually defer to the expertise in the room and just be fine. It doesn't take a ton of convincing, usually. But the expectation of these victims is that what they've seen on these forensic TV shows is true, and while the technique might be true, the substrate might be totally made up. Like, the technique of superglue fuming is definitely a true technique for developing latent prints, but I can't do it on a substrate like a t-shirt. That's not the type of substrate you fume with superglue. And that type of fabric, the weave is way too loose. It's not going to have a good surface that's going to hold those prints. So even with things like ninhydrin or something that you actually use on a porous substrate like paper, where that print actually sinks into the surface and is held in place by the fibers, by the weave of that surface. Well, paper has such a tight weave in comparison to a cotton t-shirt that it can hold those little tiny rows or strips of the fingerprint itself and hold them in place. Whereas the t-shirt, it's just going in, and maybe it's just soaking into the cotton fibers of the shirt. It's certainly not woven tightly enough that it's going to hold the print in the correct position for development and identification. I have read some research papers on trying to develop prints on fabrics, and the tighter the weave, the more successfully they were able to develop prints. So things like silk, I think they had maybe developed partial prints. I don't know that they ever developed a print that would be suitable for examination. And these, in a research condition, the prints, the fabric is laid out nice and smooth, and the print, so here's the fabric and it's laid out there really nice and smooth, and somebody comes along and, rubs around and gets a real good amount of matrix on there for deposit, and then places it, right inside of a Sharpie square, to where it's not even realistic in how somebody interacts with their environment. And even then, to barely be able to develop the print under all those controlled conditions, then it's like the chances that it would just accidentally happen in the real world at a crime scene, whatever, are very, very slim. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I am saying that it's unlikely that that would ever happen. And that's why they do these research experiments, and they really look into these techniques for those types of reasons, to see, like, is this ever even going to happen? Because if we can't do it in the lab, like, how are all those moving parts actually going to come together just perfectly for it to happen in the real world? Probably not going to. So I can't believe it hasn't shut off yet. I think I will take a quick break and come right back. All right, now I'm back. I've done my color correcting, and now we can do a little under eye concealing. My last bit of expectation versus reality comes So when I was still out west, I had to quit being a crime scene investigator because the schedule, it was becoming super aggressive. And as a single parent, I had already hemorrhaged enough money being flexible and accommodating to the organization. And then they were implementing a scheduling scheme that was absolutely impossible for me to adhere to. And when I questioned, so what's going to happen when I can't do that, my supervisor told me that they would start the disciplinary process when I had to refuse a mandatory whatever. And I said, okay, I see what's happening here. Turned in my notice, worked my 2 weeks, and when I left, literally, I don't even think it took 5 days before that supervisor said, oh, now we're not going to do that anymore. And so it was a thinly veiled attempt at getting me to leave that was successful, because I wasn't going to tank my future prospects by trying to stick out their ridiculous plan. Well, I was still out in a very expensive part of the country, and I needed to still make money. You know, I have rent to pay, I had bills that had to be paid. And I decided, because I was a college professor at the time, I got interviewed and was offered a job being a charter school substitute, K through 12. And I was like, I teach college kids. I'm sure subbing K through 12, that'll be a piece of cake. That, my friends, was incredibly difficult. And I think they need to pay teachers a hell of a lot more than they do. And I think they need to pay substitute teachers like 10 times more than they pay them to put up with what they put up with. I thought that given that it was charter schools, I didn't have any experience with charter schools, but I thought that they were kind of the elite of schools, and that's why they're a charter school and they're harder to get into or whatever.
Mama.
1 second. Yes?
I ate my breakfast and I brushed my teeth all by myself.
Good girl.
Can I have 2 stars?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, given that my impression was that charter schools are going to be some elite organization, that I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be all these like awesome, super smart, super driven kids in there. No. Charter schools, like, maybe that was 20 years ago. Today, at least where I was, it was like an alternative school, the last stop on the way to juvie. I mean, it's really, there were some students in there who were honestly good and were honestly trying, but that population was so much smaller than the population of kids that were like straight up wild.
Mommy.
So, I will be right back after I help Sweetie. Alright, I'm back. And I forgot my train of thought. Oh, right. So, the kids who were bad, they were the majority. The kids who were really trying and wanting to learn were the minority. But that was just that was now what I was doing for making money, which is something I had to do, and so I was just gonna live with it. It wasn't too long and afterwards that I started doing that, and the way that it worked was, if you got a long-term assignment, that was great, and you were just at one school for quite some time, but those were pretty rare, and usually it was just a few days here, a few days there, and then you would move on to the next place. I recall I had subbed in a special needs kindergarten for a few days, and I was talking to one of my former colleagues who was still working crime scene, and she was telling me, I was telling her about how it was subbing in the special needs kindergarten, how difficult it was. I'm not gonna lie, that shit was hard. And I mean, the subbing overall was very difficult. And I really couldn't wait to get back to what I was good at, which was crime scene, dealing with suspects, victims, detectives, dead bodies. Dealing with these wild kids was super hard. I haven't had a drink in, I think, coming up on 6 years, and that shit was about to make me start drinking again. But I digress. I was talking to my colleague, and I was explaining to her how difficult it was to have subbed in this special needs kindergarten. And she was like, man, it just sounds so good or nice or something better than what she was doing, because she had recently just had to attend and document the autopsy of an 8-year-old boy whose parents killed him, put him in a dog crate, and filled that dog crate with concrete. And then just left it in a storage unit to be found later by the authorities. And she was explaining how the body looked at autopsy and some of the interesting things that had happened to this boy. I think it was a boy. By virtue of having been encased in concrete, which was that the skin had kind of bleached, so it was very pale. All the hair on the body was gone, which, you know, is not that surprising to me, because how the pH of concrete really would do those things to the skin and eat away the hair. But she was just like, I'm done. You know, I just can't take another kid murdered and encased in concrete. She was really, really tired and needed a career change, because she'd been a detective for a long time before she ever became crime scene. So she had seen and done pretty much everything you could even imagine when it came to crimes. And I said that with the difficulty I had in the special needs kindergarten, that I would trade her happily, and she actually would accept that trade. She really wanted to hang it up for a new career, and has subsequently done that. So now she's still working in the legal realm, but no longer out on the streets having to just every day stare down the bullshit. And I'm very happy for her. And I think she's very happy in the transition and change that she has made. And I'm also very happy for myself that now I no longer am a K through 12 substitute teacher, and I'm back to doing crime scene work that I love. And my expectation of being a sub was that it was going to be so much easier than crime scene, because crime scene is very stressful and rigorous. There's high expectations of your performance, your availability, and no room for error. And I thought, well, all I gotta really do is keep these kids from killing each other and maybe teach them a little something. If the teacher has left me some kind of lesson plan, that should be a piece of cake. So my expectation of subbing was not at all the reality of it. The reality of it was so much harder for me personally than working crime scene, that I would not go back to that again. Others, maybe that's going to be their forte. For me, it certainly was not. I feel like maybe last week I should have talked about expectations versus reality, because my expectation was that I was going to be able to copy Robert's look just by virtue of having watched so many of his videos and knowing, you know, what he does or how he holds a brush, whatever. And the reality was, nah, that was a big old fail. All right, now I'm gonna be able to kind of race through the rest of the look because I'm not doing anything super special. Let me know if you guys have any expectation versus reality stories that you would like to share. If you have any makeup questions, if you have any crime scene questions, add those below. And I will absolutely answer them all. Probably both in the comment section, but also on a video because it's going to help me with creating new content. Also, if you like crime scene stories and or makeup videos, please consider subscribing. Alright, now I can go back to being fast again. There we go. I'm all done and ready to go start my day. Same as usual, gymnastics, and not really sure what we're going to do after that. Can't really think of a good experiment to see if the makeup holds up, but thank you for coming and hanging around with me. Consider subscribing. If you have any expectation versus reality stories you would like to share, questions about crime scene, questions about makeup, hit me up and I will definitely get back to you. And until next week, have a great day and a great rest of your week. I will talk to you soon. Bye.